Stop 118 on my route is a dented mailbox with my own name on it. That May morning there was a certified envelope in my satchel for it, and the return address belonged to my sister's attorney. I signed for my own lawsuit at the end of my own driveway. My name is Hannah Morrow. I'm 43, and I had spent the last year of my mom's life 11 miles up that road in her kitchen every single day. Claudia wanted half the house. Her attorney had a word for what I had done to a dying woman. I didn't argue. I didn't call her. I finished the route. What I did instead took 9 months, cost me $19,000, and ended in 4 minutes. Welcome back to Wise Family Revenge. This is the channel for the quiet ones, the people who kept showing up when nobody was counting, and what happened on the day somebody finally had to count. No shouting here, no speeches, just the record, and what it costs to put it down. If you've ever been the one who stayed, you already know how this feels. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. I start at 4:15. The sorting room at the Corbin Harbor post office smells like rubber bands and floor wax, and it has smelled that way for 19 years. Route 3 is 214 boxes and 61 miles. I can recite the stops in order the way other people recite hymns. Stop 40 is the Pelletiers, who get catalogs they never asked for. Stop 92 is a summer place, empty until June. Stop 118 is my mother's house, which as of that April is my house, which is the whole reason I'm telling you any of this. There's a rule in this job, and it isn't in the handbook. You finish the route. Weather, divorce, bad news in your own satchel, doesn't matter. Boxes get their mail. So I ran the certified envelope up to my own box, scanned it, signed the green card against the steering wheel, and drove the other 142 stops before I opened it. Delivered and received are two different things. That morning, I did both of them to the same piece of paper. I read it in the lot behind the post office with the truck still running for the heat. Petition to set aside a deed for undue influence. That's the language. 6 pages of it. And Claudia's name at the top, and my name below hers like a line item. But the phrase I kept going back to was on page 2, in the middle of a paragraph, laid in as calmly as a grocery list. Manipulated a dying woman. I read it 4 times. Then I read the last line on page 6, which was not about me at all, and which I would think about every night for the next 9 months. Exhibit list to follow. My mother's name was Eileen, and her lungs quit on her slowly, over years, the way a road washes out. End-stage COPD, and then her heart started keeping bad company with it. In May of 2024, a doctor in Bangor used the word hospice, and my mother said, "Fine, at home." And that was the entire discussion. She was 73 then. She was 74 when she died. In between, there were 331 days, and I was there for almost all of them. Not heroically, on a schedule. Before the route, I made her eggs and set out the morning pills in a plastic tray with the days printed on it. After the route, I did the laundry that nobody talks about and refilled the concentrator's water chamber, which hummed in the corner like an old refrigerator with opinions. Tuesday nights I stayed over on the couch. That's the whole story of the year, and if it sounds small, that's because it was. The first week, a nurse asked where the aides should sign in, because the agency wanted a visit log kept in the home. I found a clipboard in the cellar and drove a nail into the wall by the kitchen door and hung it there. I signed it too, because the form had a line for family, and I am nothing if not a person who fills in the line. Some nights I'd stand at the sink with my hands in the water and think about what I was doing and why it never felt like enough. I kept showing up. I thought that was the same as... And then the concentrator would cycle, and I'd lose the end of the sentence, and go back to the dishes. 9 months after she died, that clipboard was the only thing standing between me and the word manipulated. Here's the part I've had to explain to a lot of people, most of them lawyers. In February of 2024, 3 months before hospice, my mother drove herself to Ellsworth and signed the house over to me. She kept a life estate, which means she owned the right to live there until she died, and I owned everything after. It was her idea. She'd had it for 2 years, and she brought it up the way she brought up everything, in the middle of something else, while sorting coupons. And I did the one thing I'm proud of in this entire story. I stayed in the car. I sat in the lot outside Weeks and Doughty with the heater going and the radio on low for 40 minutes. Because even then, even before anybody accused me of anything, I could hear how it would sound. A woman gets the house. Her daughter drives her there. Her daughter is in the room. I wanted to be able to say, under oath, in a room with a flag in it, that I was not in the room. I even asked Arthur Weeks to record the signing. He was 71 and old-fashioned about that kind of thing, and he said it was a sensible request and he'd put the file with the deed copy. I remember exactly how relieved I felt driving home, like I'd bought insurance. That fall, Arthur Weeks had a stroke in his own driveway, and his practice closed inside of 6 weeks, and his files went to a firm in Bangor in bankers' boxes, and when Ada Quimby subpoenaed the whole works a year later, there was a deed, and a memo, and a billing record, and no video. Nobody stole it. It just wasn't there. That's the thing about doing everything right. It only protects you if the world holds still. My sister is 4 years older and she is, by any honest measure, the accomplished one. Claudia is the principal of a regional high school up in Aroostook County, which is 4 hours north of here on a good day, and 5 in March. She runs a building with 400 students in it. She can stand up in front of angry parents without a note card and bring the temperature down in a room by 10 degrees. I have watched her do it. I have admired her doing it. At our mother's funeral last April, she gave the eulogy, and she was extraordinary, and 2 women in the back row cried into the same tissue. I handled the coffee and the parking. That's not a complaint. It's a description of a family, and probably of yours. She lives 4 hours away. Not 4 hours of road. 4 hours of decisions. Every mile of that distance was chosen, over and over, for 11 months, and I never once said so out loud, because saying so out loud is how you become the bitter sister in everybody's version of the story. After the service, she caught me by the coat rack in the church hall while I was stacking cups. She said we needed to sit down about the paperwork. That's the whole sentence. We need to sit down about the paperwork. I said sure, whenever. And I meant it. And then I got busy with the cups and forgot she'd said it at all. 3 weeks later, a certified envelope came onto my route with her attorney's name in the corner. I've thought about that coat rack more times than I want to admit. She'd already filed. She had already told a man in Bangor what she was going to call me, and then she stood in a church hall and let me hand her a cup of coffee. I called her that night. It rang 4 times and went to the voicemail she recorded for work, the one where she says her title. I hung up without leaving anything. I texted. Twice. Over 2 days. Ordinary sentences. The kind you'd send anybody. Can we talk? I don't understand what this is. Nothing came back. On the 4th day, my phone rang from a Bangor number, and a man with a warm, unhurried voice introduced himself as Gerald Pike and told me that all communication would need to go through his office from here forward, and that he was sure I understood. I said I did. I didn't. Corbin Harbor has 1,900 people in it and 1 grocery store, and the news moved faster than I did. My mother's church had a ladies' circle that met Thursdays and made casseroles for people who were sick, and my mother had made a lot of casseroles in her life. It took that circle about 10 days to become 2 circles. Feeney and Winnie Grant kept calling and kept bringing things and did not once ask me a question about the deed. The rest of them went to nodding. You know the nod. It happens across a parking lot, from 20 feet. And it means we're not going to talk about it, and also we've talked about it plenty. And here's the part that I don't think people outside this job understand. I still had to deliver their mail. Every one of them. Stop by stop. In order. 6 days a week. Prescription refills and church bulletins and grandchildren's birthday cards. Into the boxes of people who had decided something about me over coffee. I did it. I did it correctly. In a town of 1,900, everybody knows your business. I was the only one who had to drive to all of their houses afterward. Ada Quimby's office is on the 2nd floor over the pharmacy in Ellsworth, up a staircase that turns twice. She is 58. There are 2 people in the firm, and she keeps a ballpoint pen stuck in her hair like a woman who has stopped pretending she won't need it. She read the petition without any expression at all, which I found insulting for about 90 seconds, and then found reassuring for the next 9 months. Then she explained the thing I had not understood, and I want to explain it to you the way she explained it to me, because it is the hinge this entire story swings on. To undo that deed, my sister has to prove undue influence. The burden is hers. That sounds good. But there's a second door. If Pike can show that I was in what the law calls a confidential relationship with my mother, and that there were suspicious circumstances around the signing, the burden can flip onto me. Then I'm the one standing up explaining why a woman gave a house to the daughter who was there. Ada put her pen down. She said plainly, without any softening, that the most damaging fact in my case was the best thing I ever did. I sat with that. 11 months of pills and laundry and Tuesday nights on the couch entered as evidence against me. She said the retainer was $8,000 and that a 2-day trial with an expert and a deposition would likely run $25,000, and that she would not take a dollar of it if I wanted to settle instead. I said I'd think about it. I had $3,100 in the bank and a truck with 190,000 miles on it. On my way out, she asked one question, almost as an afterthought, with her hand on the door. Is there anything that shows you were there? Anything a third party keeps? The federal retirement plan will let you borrow against yourself. You fill out a form, they cut you a check, and then they take it back out of your paycheck every 2 weeks for 5 years, with interest you pay to your own account. Which sounds friendly until you do the math on what that money would have earned if you'd left it alone. I took $19,000, $8,000 for the retainer, and the rest because Ada said the middle of a lawsuit is a bad place to run out of money, and she was right about that, the way she was right about everything. I signed the papers on the hood of my truck in the post office lot on a Thursday at 4 in the afternoon, using the flat spot near the wiper because the hood slopes. Ray Tibbetts, our postmaster, came out to smoke and saw me and had the good manners to go back inside. Then I sat there. I am not a person who does dramatic arithmetic, but I found myself doing it anyway, on the back of the envelope, because the numbers were sitting right there next to each other. $19,000, 331 days, $57.40 a day. That is what it was going to cost me to prove that the last year of my mother's life happened. I had just put a price on it, in pen, on a truck hood, and I hated myself for how neat it came out. I sat with the heater running and my hands on the wheel for a while. 4 o'clock I signed the loan. By 4:10, I was thinking about the nail by the kitchen door and the clipboard hanging on it, and whether anybody had taken it down. Discovery is where a lawsuit stops being about what happened and starts being about what can be written down. Pike sent interrogatories in June. 22 questions, each one with subparts, each one polite. List every occasion on which you discuss the disposition of real property with the decedent. Identify every financial account on which you were a signatory. State the number of occasions on which you were alone with the decedent in the 6 months preceding execution of the deed. I answered every one of them honestly, at my kitchen table, over 3 nights, with a legal pad and a cup of tea going cold. And I watched my own true answers turn into an accusation as I wrote them. Alone with her. I was alone with her constantly. I was alone with her at 2 in the morning when she couldn't get her breath, and we sat on the edge of the bed together and I counted for her. In and out, because counting helped. Write that down in a numbered response, and it reads like a stakeout. They asked how many times I'd been alone with my mother. I wanted to ask them back how many times it takes before it counts as taking care of somebody. Ada said not to write that. I didn't write it. But there was one question in the middle of the stack that didn't fit with the others, and I read it 3 times before I moved on, and then I came back to it after I'd finished everything else. Question 14 asked me to identify the current location, carrier, and passcode of the decedent's cellular telephone. Why on God's earth did Gerald Pike care about my mother's phone? My niece is 16. Her name is Sadie, and when she was 9 she spent a whole August at my mother's house learning to bait a hook and refusing to touch what she caught. She texted me on a Tuesday in July at 9 at night. Is it true you took Grammy's house? I sat on my back step with the phone in both hands. I typed that her grandmother gave it to me. Deleted it. Typed that there was a life estate and it was recorded in February of 2024 and that her mother had known about it for over a year. Deleted that too, because a 16-year-old should not be handed a chain of title. Typed something warm about the summer she was 9 and deleted that fastest of all, because it was manipulative. And because that was the word already sitting in a court file with my name near it. In the end, I sent back the shortest thing I could type. No. She didn't answer. She didn't answer the next day either, or the day after, and eventually I stopped checking, which took about 2 weeks and never fully took. Here's what I couldn't shake. She wrote took, not got, not was given, not inherited. Took. That's a verb somebody chose. 16-year-olds do not reach for that verb on their own about an aunt who taught them to bait a hook. Somebody handed it to her, and she picked it up the way kids pick up their parents' words, without knowing they've picked up anything at all. I put the phone face down on the step and sat out there until the mosquitoes won. I mentioned the clipboard to Ada almost in passing, at the end of an hour we'd spent on my bank statements. I said there had been a sign-in sheet by the kitchen door for the aides. She sat up. It was the first time in 2 months I'd seen her sit up. She asked what agency and what form and who kept the original, and I said the agency was Down East Hospice out of Ellsworth, and the form had their logo on the top, and their nurses signed it every visit, and so did the aides, and so did I. Ada explained the difference, and it mattered more than anything else in this story. A diary I kept is a diary I kept. Nobody has to believe it. A visit log on an agency form, maintained in the ordinary course of business, collected by that agency, and testified to by their custodian of records, is a different animal entirely. It isn't me saying I was there, it's an institution saying that on a given date, a licensed aide walked into a house and wrote down who was in it. The original belongs to them. The one on my nail is a working copy. Then she said the sentence that made my stomach drop, and she said it in the same flat tone she used for everything. If we want to use it, we don't get to take just that page. We subpoena your mother's entire hospice record. All of it. Marisol Reyes was the aide who came 4 mornings a week for most of that year, and she used to say something when she signed in, half to herself, in a voice like she was closing a drawer. Nobody signs in for somebody they're not visiting. Ada laid it out without any cushioning, which I've come to understand is a kind of respect. A hospice chart is not a list of dates. It is nursing notes. It is bowel records and skin checks and what a person said at 4 in the morning in week 40 when the oxygen wasn't enough, and she wasn't entirely in the room with you anymore. It is the bath log. It is every indignity, written down by professionals in professional language, which somehow makes it worse. Put that under subpoena and attach it to a filing in Hancock County, and it becomes a public record, and public means public. Anybody at the courthouse can ask for the file. My mother closed the bathroom door when she could no longer stand up unassisted. She would rather have fallen than have me see. That was who she was, from the time I was a child, and dying did not change one thing about it. And now to prove that I was a daughter and not a con artist, I would have to hand a stranger every page of the year she spent losing that fight. Ada gave me the authorization form and said, "Take it home. There's no hurry. We have until the 30th. It sat on my kitchen table for 3 nights. If you've ever been the one who stayed, the one who did the nights and the pills and the laundry nobody talks about, you already know nobody hands you a receipt for it. Do me one favor today. Write down the dates. Keep the sign-in sheet. Save the appointment texts. You will never want them until the day you need them. And if this is hitting close to home, leave a comment and subscribe." There is no polite way to take days off from a rural route. Every day I wasn't there, my 61 miles had to go somewhere, and where it went was onto 2 other carriers who already had their own. Ray Tibbetts split Route 3 3 ways on my depositions days and again for the pretrial conference. He didn't complain to me once. Somebody else did, formally, in writing, through the union, and they were not wrong to, and I would have filed it myself if I'd been them. I want to be honest about what that did to me, because it's the part I didn't see coming. Losing the church ladies stung, losing my route hollowed me out. I have been on that road for 19 years. Mrs. Pelletier is 91, and if her Tuesday paper is still in the box on Wednesday, I knock. I know which driveway ices first. I know whose son is deployed by the postmarks. On the second of my deposition days, I stood in the sorting room in ordinary clothes at 4:30, holding a coffee, watching a 26-year-old kid load my satchel into a different vehicle. Somebody else delivered stop 118 that day. I knew exactly what time he got there, because I know exactly what time everybody gets everywhere on that road. Ray came over and stood next to me and looked at the same thing I was looking at. He said, "You know, you don't have to prove anything to me." Right. And I stood there holding a coffee I hadn't drunk, and I could not think of a single thing to say back, and it took me another 5 months to understand why. I hadn't been inside since the funeral. I'd kept the power on and the water running, and I'd stood in the driveway plenty, because it's stop 118 and I stand in that driveway 6 days a week. But I hadn't gone in. That Saturday I did. The house had that shut-up smell, dust and old coffee and something underneath it that was still her. The concentrator was gone. The hospital bed was gone. The recliner was where it had always been since 1998. And by the kitchen door, on the nail I drove myself, the clipboard was still hanging exactly where I left it, because nobody had come to take anything down, because there was nobody but me. I lifted it off, and there on the wall was a rectangle of paint a shade brighter than everything around it, the shadow of the thing. 331 days of the sun coming through that window and going around it. I stood there holding a clipboard and looking at a clean rectangle on a wall, and that is when it finally went through me. All of it. The way it hadn't at the funeral or in Ada's office, or on the truck hood. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and turned the pages. Every line dated. Every line signed. My handwriting on almost all of them, small and slanted and getting worse toward the end. Marisol's on most of the rest, round and cheerful, with the time written out. Feeney's a few times, the chaplain twice. And then, on a page from the middle of the year, a third hand I did not recognize at all. 3 lines, 3 separate dates, in handwriting that was not mine and not any of theirs. I signed the authorization on Monday morning at 10 of 7, on the hood of the truck again, in the lot, before the root. The pen skipped on the first stroke, and I had to go over the H. I want to be exact about what I traded, because I've had a long time to think about it, and I'm not going to dress it up now. My mother spent 74 years keeping her body her own business. She kept it from her husband. She kept it from her doctors longer than she should have. She kept it from me until keeping it from me became physically impossible, and then she kept her face turned toward the window. And I took that year. All of it. The notes about her skin and her bowels and the night she called me by her sister's name, and I handed it to a court so that a judge could count how many times my sister walked through the door. There's no version where I get to undo that. Once it's filed, it's filed. Somebody in 2050 doing genealogy could pull that file. I did it anyway. I'd do it again, and I've never once felt clean about it. That's not a contradiction. It's just what it costs. I gave the form to Ada at 8:15, and she put it in a folder without ceremony and said the records would take 8 to 12 weeks. Then she mentioned, on her way to the copier, that she'd sent a second subpoena at the same time, a small one, mostly housekeeping. My mother's cell carrier, records and message content, 18 months. I said okay. I didn't think about it again for 2 months. Ada called me on a Wednesday in October while I was at stop 62 with the flag up and a package on my lap. She said, "Come to the office when you're done." Then she said, "Don't drive fast." That's how I knew. I got there at 4. She had a folder squared up on the desk in front of her, and she turned it around and slid it across. And she didn't say anything at all, which was not like her. It was a transcript of text messages from my mother's number. December of 2024. Month 7. Claudia to Mom, on a Tuesday afternoon, in the middle of a perfectly ordinary thread about a dentist appointment. I'll come when the house goes back where it belongs. My mother had answered hours later, and barely. I'm tired. And then, 2 days after that, my sister again. Ask her who's going to change you next year. I read it standing up. I read it 4 times. The same as the petition, which I have since decided is just what I do. Ada let me finish and then said, in her flat voice, that a judge would find those messages relevant to the question of who exactly had been applying pressure to a dying woman, and that, in her professional opinion, this ended the case. She labeled the folder while I stood there. Written on the tab in blue ballpoint, in her square handwriting, Exhibit 14. And God help me, the first thing I felt was not grief for my mother reading that on a Tuesday afternoon. The first thing I felt was relief. And under the relief, moving fast and low like something under ice, was joy. I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat and I did not turn the radio on. The next morning, Ada called and told me the rest of it, because she is thorough and because she'd wanted me to sleep first. Court files in Hancock County are public. Not theoretically public. Actually public. Walk-in public. A clerk and a counter and a photocopier. Claudia is a principal. Her school board meets the second Monday of the month, and there are people in that county who have wanted her chair for a decade and would take that transcript to the paper before lunch. Ada wasn't dramatic about it. She said it the way you'd read a weather forecast. This will likely end her career, and it will certainly end her marriage's peace, and you should know that going in. And then she said the last part. Sadie is 16. 16-year-olds find things. If it's in the file, she will read what her mother wrote about her grandmother, and she will not be able to unread it, at 16, for the rest of her life. I sat in my kitchen with the phone against my ear and looked at the rectangle of brighter paint I could see in my head. I asked one question. Do we still win without it? Ada took her time. She said probably. The burden is my sister's, and my sister has nothing, and the log is the log. Then she said the sentence I carried into the courthouse in January. Probably is an expensive word, Hannah. Don't buy it unless you know what you're buying. The settlement conference was in November in a conference room at the courthouse with a laminate table and a picture of a lighthouse. Claudia sat across from me with her hands folded and a legal pad she never wrote on. We were 8 feet apart. She did not look at me. Not once. Not for 2.5 hours. And I want to be fair to her. So I'll say this. It is very hard to look at somebody when you know what you texted their mother in December. Pike made the offer around 11. I keep the house. I pay Claudia $95,000 over 10 years. Unsecured. No interest. Both sides withdraw. And then the phrase that made my decision for me before I even knew I was deciding. No findings. Meaning no judge ever rules on anything. Meaning the petition stays in the file forever, 6 pages, with that sentence on page 2, and nothing after it. Somebody in 2050 doing genealogy pulls that file and the last word in it is manipulated. I said no. Ada asked me twice, once in the room and once in the hallway, whether I understood I was turning down $95,000 I did not have to pay lawyers I could not afford. I said I understood. I drove home down Route 1 in the dark with the heater on. Somewhere past the Hancock line it came to me, and it was not a good feeling. It was the kind of thought that sits down next to you and doesn't leave. I had just turned down $95,000 to buy one sentence in a public file. I was starting to understand what I actually wanted. It was not the house. The certified hospice records came back the week before Thanksgiving, 400 and some pages in a Redwell with a cover letter from the custodian. Ada and I went through the visit log page by page in her office with the good lamp on, comparing the agency's original against the working copy I'd carried in a grocery bag. They matched. Every line. And there, on the pages from the middle of the year, were the 3 entries in the hand I didn't know. Ada had a magnifier. I didn't need one. I had known since that Saturday in August and had refused to know it. The way you refuse a thing you can't do anything with yet. It was Claudia's handwriting. I have 26 Christmas cards from that handwriting. I have a recipe card for pumpkin bread in it, in my own kitchen drawer, in a tin with a rubber band around it. My sister had come. 3 times. She had walked into our mother's house and picked the pen up off the string and signed the agency's form on the line for family, the same as I had, 3 times, in 331 days. Ada said quietly that this was good for us, and started explaining why. and I put my hand up. I needed a minute, because it changed the shape of everything I'd been carrying. Not the case. The case got simpler. Me. All year I had told myself a clean story about a woman who never came. That story was wrong by 3 days, and 3 days is not nothing, and 3 days is also not 11 months, and I sat in a lawyer's office trying to hold both of those at once. Then I looked at the dates. I keep my own calendars, 19 years of them, in a box, because the Postal Service will ask you in a grievance what you did on a Tuesday 2 years ago, and you had better be able to say. The 3 dates were August 12th, August 13th, and August 14th of 2024. I didn't have to open the box. I knew what that week was before I got the lid off. Mandatory training in Bangor. 3 days, safety recertification, and the new scanner rollout. The only 3 consecutive days I was off that road and out of that kitchen in the entire year. Marisol covered the mornings. Dot did the evenings. I called at 8 and at 4, and my mother told me not to fuss. My sister drove down from Aroostook County on all 3 of those days, 4 hours each way, and sat with our mother, and signed the sheet, and drove home. And on the 14th, she left before I got back at 6. I sat on the floor of my hall closet with a calendar in my hands for a long time. Claudia hadn't been avoiding our mother. She'd been avoiding me. She came when the house was empty of the person who knew how to do it, and she left before that person got home, and she did that 3 times, 4 hours each way, and never mentioned it once. Not at the funeral, not at the coat rack. And here's the part that hardened me back up, right when I was going soft. She knew the log existed. She'd signed it. She had picked up that pen and written her own name on the record, and then she went ahead and filed anyway. We did trial prep in January, 3 sessions, in a windowless room with a whiteboard nobody erased properly. Ada played pike. She was very good at it, which I found unnerving. She would ask something reasonable and I would start explaining, and she would stop me. Answer the question. Then stop. She asked, "Isn't it true that you were alone with your mother almost every day?" I started to say that of course I was, that somebody had to be, that the aides came 4 mornings. She stopped me again. Yes is the answer. Yes. Then nothing. I said it feels like lying. She said it isn't lying, it's declining to help him. Then she put down the pen and explained the whole strategy in one go, and it was the first time I understood what we were doing. Pike wins by volume. He will talk for 2 days. He will make it about character and impression and the sad shape of the thing. You cannot beat him at that. You are not going to outtalk a man who bills by the hour. She tapped the Redwell on the table. You beat him by being countable. So we don't argue. We put the record in order, and we let it sit there. On the last day she added one more instruction, and it was the hardest of all of them. And don't cry, she said. Not because they'll think you're weak, because if you cry they'll say you're performing, and if you don't cry, they'll say you're cold. And the only way through that door is to not give them either one. So I practiced not crying. It's harder than the route in February. The night before trial at 9:10, headlights came up my driveway. My niece had driven 4 hours by herself in January on a learner's schedule she was not supposed to be driving on, and she stood on my porch in a coat that wasn't warm enough with her hands jammed in the pockets. She said, "Did you make Grammy sign things?" Straight out, no hello. I had everything. That is what I want you to understand about that porch. I had a folder in my truck with her mother's own words in it. I had dates and a chain of title and a transcript that would have ended the conversation in about 90 seconds and left that girl with nowhere to stand. I have never in my life wanted anything the way I wanted to hand it to her. I said, "No." She said, "That's not an answer." And she was right. It isn't. So I gave her the only thing I had left. I said, "I am not going to tell you one single thing tonight that would make you hate your mother." She stood there. She was crying and furious about crying. She said, "You all are unbelievable, both of you," and she got in the car and backed down my driveway too fast. There's a thing nobody warns you about. When a family fights, the kids get handed a version of you, and you never get to hand them yours. If you've been on either side of that, you know exactly what I mean. Tell me in the comments, did you get to explain yourself, or did you just have to wait? And subscribe, because this gets worse before it gets better. I watched her taillights the whole 4 miles of straight road. Then I went in and ironed a shirt. Hancock County Courthouse, Ellsworth, the 26th of January. Courtroom 1. Tall windows, snow outside brighter than the lights inside. A steam radiator that knocked like somebody wanted in. No jury. A bench trial is a judge and a file, and ours was Justice Merrill, who is somewhere past 60 and did not look up from that file for 2 entire days. Counting both counsel tables and the gallery, there were 9 of us in that room, the judge included. 2 of my mother's church ladies sat in the 3rd row with their coats on their laps. Pike opened for 40 minutes. He was good. He built it carefully, like a man laying block. The isolated widow. The daughter with the key and the pill organizer and the password to everything. The other daughter, far away, working, trusting, confidential relationship, suspicious circumstances. And then he landed it, unhurried, almost gently, looking at the judge and not at me. You manipulated a dying woman. Claudia testified for an hour and a half and she was excellent, and I mean that. Composed. Warm where warmth helped. She never once said anything that was flatly untrue, which is a skill. Ada objected twice all morning. That was it. Then she stood up and put our case in through a woman named Renee Doucette, the custodian of records for Down East Hospice, and it was the least dramatic thing you have ever seen. Identify the document. Is it kept in the ordinary course? Was it made at or near the time? Page after page after page. I barely spoke all day. At 4:50, Justice Merrill closed the binder without a word and said, 9 o'clock tomorrow, and stood up, and everybody stood, and I was completely certain I was losing. I got to the courthouse at 20 of 7 the next morning because I have not been late anywhere since 2007. The lot was empty except for one car under the light at the far end with frost on the inside of the windshield. That's the detail that got me. Frost on the inside means somebody breathed in there all night. It was my sister's Subaru, and my sister was in it, reclined back with her coat over her like a blanket, and her good shoes on the passenger seat. She'd driven down after her school day. 4 hours, arriving somewhere around 2 in the morning, and she had not taken a room in Ellsworth, and I do not know to this day whether that was money or something else. I stood there in the cold longer than I meant to. She woke up the way people do when they feel somebody looking, all at once, and she put the window down about 4 inches, and neither of us said anything for a second. Then she said, I couldn't be in the room. You could. I've never known what that says about me. That's all. That's the whole conversation my sister and I had in 9 months. Then she put the window up, and got out on the other side, and put her good shoes on standing next to the car with one hand on the roof, and walked into that building and spent the morning telling a judge that I had worked on a dying woman for a house. I want to tell you that I forgave her in that parking lot. I didn't. But I understood her, completely, for about 90 seconds, and that turned out to be a very bad morning to understand my sister. We broke for lunch at 12:30. Ada and I went to the little room behind the clerk's office that they let lawyers use, with 2 chairs and a table and a vending machine that took bills only if you fed them like a nervous horse. She set the yellow folder on the table and squared it with the edge, which is a thing she does. Exhibit 14 goes in after lunch, she said. It ends this. Then she did the thing I will always be grateful for. She did not advise me. She laid it out, both directions, in that flat voice. If we put it in, Pike has no case by 2 o'clock, we move for fees, and there is a real chance the court makes my sister pay my $19,000, and a finding goes in the record that says who actually pressured our mother. If we don't put it in, we rest on the log. The burden stays on Claudia, and probably is still the word. She said, It's your case. Tell me by 1:15. And then she went to get coffee and left me alone with it, which was also a kindness. I sat there. Through the glass in the door I could see into the back of the courtroom, And there, in the last row, 3 rows behind her mother, in the coat that wasn't warm enough, was Sadie. She had come. She had sat through the morning. Nobody had told me. I looked at the clock over the vending machine. 12:32. 43 minutes to decide what kind of winning I actually wanted. I took the folder and went out to the back stairwell where it was quiet, and I sat down on the landing between the first and second floor with it on my knees, and I did not open it. I already knew what was in it. And sitting on a cold, concrete step in a courthouse in January, I finally saw the thing I had been walking around for 9 months. I did not want that house. I want to be careful here, because it would be easy to make this sound noble, and it isn't. I liked that house. But I turned down $95,000 in November, which is a great deal of money for a house that needs a roof and a septic, and I did not do that for real estate. I did it for a sentence. I wanted the record. I wanted somebody with a robe on to say out loud, in a room with a flag in it, that Hannah Morrow did not manipulate a dying woman, that Hannah Morrow was there, 331 days, and here is the proof, filed and stamped and permanent. 19 years on a route where nobody thanks you. 11 months in a kitchen where nobody was counting. And what I had done, without ever once deciding to do it, was take the last year of my mother's life and turn it into evidence of my own worth. Ray Tibbetts asked me in a sorting room whether I knew I didn't have to prove anything to him, and I couldn't answer him, and this was why. Some of what I felt toward my sister was rage, and some of it, I could finally admit on that step, was that she was the only person alive who could give me the thing I wanted by being destroyed in public. I sat there until 11 minutes past 1. Then I stood up, and my knees hurt from the cold, and I went and found Ada in the hallway by the water fountain and told her what I wanted to do. At 1:15, the clerk called us back in. The radiator was still knocking. Justice Merrill came out, sat down, opened the binder, and said, "Ms. Quimby?" without looking up. Ada stood. She buttoned her jacket, which she had not done all trial, and she said it in exactly the voice she used to ask me about bank statements. "Your Honor." Respondent withdraws Exhibit 14. We rest on the visit log. Then she sat down. I have thought about the next 4 seconds more than any other 4 seconds of my life. Pike came halfway out of his chair before he knew he was doing it. His whole afternoon was in that folder. He had a binder of his own with tabs in it, 3 inches thick, and every tab was a way to fight those messages, to explain them, to contextualize them, to put his client back together in front of a judge after they landed. He had prepared for a war, and we had just declined to have one, and he stood there in a courtroom in Ellsworth with a hand on a binder he no longer needed. Claudia looked at Ada, then at Pike. Then, for the first time in 9 months, at me. She did not know what had been in that folder. She only knew that her lawyer had gone gray, and I sat with my hands flat on my thighs and looked straight ahead at the seal on the wall because I did not trust my face. I had just put down the only thing on this earth that could make the county know I was not what he called me. No finding. No fee award. $19,000 staying exactly where it was, on my paycheck, every 2 weeks, until 2030. In the last row of a nearly empty courtroom, a 16-year-old girl in a thin coat sat with no idea at all that anything had just happened to her, or that somebody had chosen it on a stairwell, or that she would go her whole life not knowing what she had almost read. That was the trade. I made it on purpose. I would like to be able to tell you it felt good. It felt like the moment right after you set down something heavy, when your arms are still shaking and the weight is still in your hands. Justice Merrill did not react. He turned a page, then another. Nobody in that room said anything, and the radiator knocked twice and I could hear the clerk's chair creak. He was reading the log. He went forward through it, then back, taking his time in a way that started out uncomfortable and became almost unbearable. Then he closed the binder halfway, put one finger in it to hold his place, and looked up. It was the first time in 2 days I had seen his eyes. He didn't look at Ada, and he didn't look at Pike. He looked at my sister, and he spoke in the most ordinary voice imaginable, the voice of a man asking a clerk for a form. "Ms. Morrow, this log covers 331 days. "Show me the days your name is on it." Pike said, "Your Honor." And Merrill said, "I'd like her to find them." And Pike sat back down. They handed the binder across. And my sister, who can quiet a room of angry parents without a note card, stood in the witness box in Ellsworth and turned pages. It took a long time. Paper is loud in a room like that. She found the first one and read the date out. August 12th. She kept going. August 13th. August 14th. Then she stopped turning, because there weren't any more, and she knew it, and she had known it since her own lawyer got the same records we did. She stood there holding the binder open. Justice Merrill let it sit for a moment. Then he asked the second half of the question, and I don't believe anybody in that room had thought of it, including me, including Ada, including my sister, who had 4 hours in a car to think about everything. And on those 3 days, Ms. Morrow, where was your sister? Nothing. Claudia's mouth opened. Bangor. Safety recertification. The new scanners. 3 days. The only 3 in the year. She knew it, because she'd made sure of it before she got in the car. And she could not make herself say it out loud in that room. Pike stood up and got half a sentence out about the limited probative value of attendance records, and then he stopped in the middle of it and sat down, and did not stand up again. Nobody signs in for somebody they're not visiting. He ruled from the bench. He did not take it under advisement. He did not recess. He did not thank anybody for their thorough briefing. He put his glasses back on and started talking, and the court reporter's hands went, and it took 4 minutes. I know it took 4 minutes because there is a clock on the back wall of courtroom 1, and I watched the minute hand, because counting is what I do, and because I could not look at anything else. He said the petitioner bore the burden of establishing undue influence by clear and convincing evidence. He said a confidential relationship, standing alone, is not enough where the record shows consistent care and no evidence of procurement. He said the respondent was not present at the execution of the deed. He said the contemporaneous agency records were the most reliable evidence before the court as to the circumstances of the decedent's final year. Petition dismissed. Deed stands. Each party bears its own costs. That's it. That is the entire thing. No finding that my sister lied. No finding that I didn't. Nothing that says vindicated, because I had traded that away on a stairwell 50 minutes earlier and I got exactly the deal I signed up for. The 2 church ladies in the 3rd row did not make a sound. Ada put her pen in her hair, and I sat there in a hard chair with my hands flat on my thighs, and I waited for the thing I had spent 9 months and $19,000 buying, and what came instead was very quiet and not at all what I ordered. Somebody had counted 331 days out loud in a room with a flag in it by a man with no reason on earth to be kind to me, and about 10 seconds after I felt it, I felt the other thing, the one I wasn't ready for. I didn't need it. I had never needed it. I stood up when they told us to stand. Claudia was already in the hallway waiting for me. She was standing by the window at the end of the hall with her coat over her arm. I stopped a few feet short. I told her there had been an exhibit and that we pulled it. I did not tell her what it was. I said only that it existed, and that it came out of Mom's phone, and that she should probably know it had been in the room. She looked at me for a while. Whatever she was doing behind her face, she has always been better at it than I am. Then she said, "I still think you did it." And I understood that she meant it, that she was not being cruel, that she has to mean it, because the arithmetic on the other side of not meaning it is 4 hours each way and 3 days out of 331 and a lifetime to sit with. I didn't give her anything. I didn't forgive her, standing in a hallway, 12 minutes after a ruling. I didn't hand her the sentence she needed either. I said, "Drive safe. It's supposed to ice up past Bangor." Which is true, and was all I had. I went down the steps into the cold. Behind me, up at the top, with nobody near her and her keys already in her hand, my sister said it once more, and not to me, and much more quietly than her lawyer had said it the day before. "You manipulated a dying woman." It was not an accusation anymore. It was a question, and she is going to be carrying it a lot longer than I carried mine. Sadie came in April on a Saturday, without calling first, which runs in the family. She stood on the porch again, but she came in this time and sat at my kitchen table, and she said she wanted to know what actually happened. All of it, not the version. I thought about that for a minute. Then I got the copy of the log out of the drawer where I keep the pumpkin bread recipe, and I put it in front of her, and I did not say anything at all. She read it for over an hour. Marisol's round handwriting with the time written out. Mine, getting smaller toward the end. Feeney, the chaplain. And her mother's, 3 times, in August. She found those herself. She put her finger on them. She asked me if Grammy was in pain, and I told her the truth, which is that for a while she was, and then they got on top of it, and then at the end she mostly slept, and that the hard part wasn't pain, it was that she hated being helped. Sadie cried a little and I let her, and I didn't tell her not to. Exhibit 14. I never burned in a wood stove under a full moon. Ada destroyed it with the rest of the closed file, on the schedule her firm uses for everything, which is 7 years, and I signed nothing and watched nothing. It just quietly stopped existing, the way most things do. The following March, and the snow was going gray and sliding off the banks in sheets. Stop 118 has a new box on the same dented post, and the name on the side of it is H. Morrow, and I put it there myself with a level. Because if you're going to do a thing, I don't live in the house. A hospice nurse from down east rents it from me for less than she should pay. That morning there was 1 piece for the box down the road, and 1 forwarded piece in my tray. An insurance thing out of Augusta, addressed to my mother, and under my mother's name in the little window, my sister's name, and an address, 4 hours north. I wrote the endorsement on it and dropped it in the outgoing tub and got back in the truck. Delivered isn't received. I'm only responsible for half of that. I kept showing up. I thought that was the same as being seen. It wasn't. It was better than that. It was just true. Nobody hands you a receipt for the year you give somebody, and on the day a court finally counts it out loud, you find out you already knew. That's my story. 331 days, 1 clipboard on 1 nail, and 4 minutes. If you're the one who stays, write the dates down. Keep the sign-in sheet, not for a courtroom, for you. And if you know somebody doing it right now with nobody counting, send them this. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.